Good evening and welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm Robert Phoenix with a face full of concrete. Thanks to the lovely cedar pollen that I've not yet become accustomed to after 4 years of living in Texas. We are in the midst of its rampant bloom, which is like a plague upon one's sinuses and mucous membranes, lungs, etc. And I'm not the only one. I mean, I was today with talking with a parent, my son's baseball practice, and recently moved from Portland, and then before that, California. And I asked him, "Have you discovered the cedar pollen yet?" And he said, "We all thought we had the flu for 2 weeks." So anyway, bear with me as I go through the sniffles and the snuffles and the concrete head, because we have a lot to talk about tonight. There's a lot that's happened over the last 48 hours, and we have a lot more to come. This is tonight's live stream. This is the 11th house. This is where we get into astrology and the cosmological occurrences of our current times, which are unlike any other. So I wanted to get into the inauguration again because we talked about the inauguration from a predictive standpoint, but we haven't addressed the inauguration from the notion of what I would call a seal. And the seal being the template for the time that Trump will be president of the United States. Now, there's always going to be that zero Aquarius sun because it represents hope and newness and the bright star and the dawn of the new day. The Aeon, which is very Aquarian, but we're trying to get kind of an overall picture. And everything in this presidency is above the horizon. Uranus, Neptune, Venus, Mars, all in the 11th house. Excuse me. Sun at the midheaven. And then we have Pluto, Mercury in the 9th, Saturn in the 8th, and Jupiter and Moon in the 6th and 7th with the true node right down there at Virgo, 2 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about house by house how this portends for the next 4 years. First of all, Taurus rising, I think, is really indicative of a Trump presidency. Now, every time this goes off at 12 noon on the 20th of January, it's always going to be Taurus rising because the sun will be at the midday point, which is the midheaven, correct? So actually the midheaven in the chart happens to be 26 Capricorn, and the sun is conjunct. So we have a Capricorn midheaven, and we have Taurus on the first house cusp. So on the one hand, we see the final degrees of Capricorn making its presence known, as it would with any other presidential chart, right there on the 20th of January, because it was, again, based on 12 noon, right? That is the apex of the chart at noon. So we have the sun at the apex, just 4 degrees off. Now, it always starts off with this kind of grounded relationship with the horizontal plane of consciousness, which is like the everyday world. That's Taurus. That's exactly Taurus. And this actually suits Donald Trump fairly well because Donald Trump's midheaven is in Taurus. So we have a Trump midheaven in Taurus, and we have a ascendant in Taurus. So the two are complementary and mutually receptive. The idea here with this occurrence, it's not annular, but this occurrence, which takes place every 4 years at 12 noon, on the 20th of January, is that with the Taurus ascendant, the energy is about, well, number one, it's about working, it's about being grounded, it's about the economy. An energy that brings a physical drive with the template of the entire chart. It also has to do with money and the bull in Babylon. That's the nature of Taurus. So this suits Trump quite well because this is the type of president that he is. This is where he comes from. It's his world. Even with the 26 degree Capricorn ascendant, I'm sorry, midheaven, that's still, again, very much Trumpian or Trump-like because of the relationship with Capricorn and ascent, towers. So this is right in his wheelhouse, these two cardinal points. What's interesting is that if you go back in time to the Obama administration, again, 12 noon, 20th, this is where it always happens, that Taurus ascendant doesn't really fit as well. And it doesn't really matter in some ways where other planets are in the chart. We know Obama, whether we think he's a Leo because of his birth chart, and he really feels like a Leo, although his hair is quite short for a Leo. But then again, he's president of the United States, having a full-on fro. Wouldn't it be great if Obama had grown a fro for his second term? Or maybe like just grew it out and dreadlocked it out. I mean, how cool would that have been? I mean, he would have been the most down president of all time if he went full-on fro. I mean, maybe that's what his problem was. That he was really not embracing his full Leo by cutting his hair all the time. One should consider that. Just for a moment. Anyway, Taurus rising did not suit an Obama presidency. And I'm not knocking Obama, although I probably will at some point. But I'm not knocking him. It's not the type of president that he was. He was not a Taurus rising president. And if he is a Leo, then his sun is squaring very close to the ascendant. So he's going to have a challenged relationship with a Taurus ascendant. And Obama, being born in 1961, would have Neptune on the descendant, pulling away from the Taurus ascendant. I always thought, though, that Obama was a Scorpio rising. That was my take. The first chart that I saw by Obama, I think was one of Lois Roden's last charts. And she did not have his time, and she was sort of getting into a rectification with Obama. And it made total sense. I mean, to this day, I really think that the Scorpio rising chart of Obama with Neptune kind of on the ascendant or in the first house actually fit for a number of different reasons. But mostly because with Neptune in the first house, we could place our projection onto the Neptune first house person in any way, shape, or form as we wanted. Avatar, spiritual guide, golden child, terrorist. I mean, that really fits the Obama kind of pattern, with all these different gradations of persona and self. But clearly, he was not a Taurus rising president. This actually helps Trump because he's a Taurus kind of guy. Taurus on the midheaven. He's a worker. He's got Jupiter natally in the second house, Taurus's house. So that makes a lot of sense. So I think that just from the point of view from the ascendant, this is resonant with Trump in a significant kind of way. Just the ascendant alone, okay? We go down to the bottom of the chart, another cardinal point. We're looking at Cancer, and that fourth house cusp is, let's see, we get 20, looks like 28, 26 opposite the midheaven. And this is not quite where his Cancerian planet showed, but I believe His Saturn is ingressing into the fourth. His Mars is not in the fourth, which is, I think, a good thing. His Mars in Leo, 26 degrees, shows up in the fifth house of the inauguration moment. It's creative. That Mars is creative in the fifth house. True node is at 3 Virgo, which is conjunct his ascendant. His ascendant is 29 Leo, and the true node at 3 Virgo is conjunct his ascendant. There's a mission that's connected to his chart. You see, I've talked about this before. Trump his progressed sun sign is at 0 Virgo. So his progressed sun was conjunct the true node in Virgo on the day he was inaugurated. That's kind of a big deal. And if you look at Regulus, which is the royal star, also at 0 degrees, we have Trump's progressed sun at 0 Virgo, Regulus at 0 Virgo, and the true node at 2 degrees, 3 degrees Virgo. I mean, even if you're dealing with a progressed chart, that 3-degree separation is a bit of an outlier to the ascendant, but it's really close on the natal chart and not far off from. Literally, it's like 1 degree. It's about a 2-degree orb. It's really, really close to his progressed sun at Virgo. So he has a progressed sun at 0, which is just conjunct. He's just come off of last year. He came off of his sun before, from birthday to birthday. He was at 29 Leo, so he had progressed sun conjunct his ascendant at 29 Leo. I mean, how could the guy not be on a major run with that? I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. But when he talked about giving the country back to the people, there was no doubt in my mind that there was a level of sincerity there. Look, how many times have you watched a politician go through Politico speak and just checked in with your inner 15-year-old and called bullshit on it? A lot of times. I want you to go back and listen to that speech. If you haven't listened to it, go watch it and see if there's any cognitive dissonance in there. David John Oates did some reverse speeches for that. If you haven't found out who David John Oates is, he's an interesting character. He's been around for a long time. Art Bell used to have David John Oates on his show. David John Oates is an Australian guy who had a speech impediment, and how he figured out, or how he learned to deal with his speech impediment, was he would record his voice and then play it back. And during the playing back of his, and he was reversing it, he'd go back and forwards, backwards and forwards, he would hear words that were embedded inside the reverse speech. And he figured out that there is some relationship to the unconscious through the reverse speech, that you could figure out if a person was being congruent, if the reversals were in conjunction or in, again, congruence with what he was talking about, what the person was talking about. And he's done thousands of these things. And he started off on Art Bell with these archaic recorders. Now he does it with, obviously, software. And some of his reverse speeches over the years have been pretty accurate and pretty mind-boggling. And his reverse speech for the Trump speech was incredible. It was like really congruent. The only thing that he found in 2 of the reversals is that there would be some kind of a lawsuit that Trump would be dealing with as a president. That doesn't surprise me, because the left is going to try to clog up all the lanes for having any kind of movement. But that's another discussion. We have Taurus on the ascendant here, which indicates that with that ascendant and with the Trump presidency, that this is a rising sign that will have some merit in a person that wants to bring jobs back. Now, if we go to the 6th house, which is the house of purpose and service and work, what do we see there? We see Jupiter. It's expansion in that area. It's expansion through negotiation, because that's what Libra does, right? It negotiates. It brings balance, win-win, theoretically. And there it is in the sixth house. That's the house of everyday work. You know, people that cut your grass, people that make your lattes, people that walk your dogs, people that change your oil, people that change your money, people that do your taxes, people that take your temperature at the hospital. It's all there in the sixth house, and there's Jupiter expanding. It's in expansion mode. Now, it's in square with the sun, but that's not a terrible square. We've talked about this before. Squares with Jupiter are implying that there is more area for growth. Now, there can be overgrowth, or there can be over-exaggeration, or over-enthusiasm, but why not? I mean, as long as it's tempered by some realistic energy, realistic perspectives, the square is forcing the two planets to have a significant dialogue and crack open with Jupiter, crack open the mystery. It's like fill it up, fill it up, fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. But pressing hard on the action. So there's potential here. Now Jupiter is also in sextile with Saturn. Saturn's in the eighth house, and this is a bad place for Saturn. I am not going to pussyfoot this. It is a bad place for Saturn. It is in trine with Uranus at that time, and it's in sextile with Jupiter, so there can be money involved with the Jupiter sextile. Now, we think of overseas markets, overseas marketplaces, American companies doing business overseas. That's Saturn in Sagittarius. Correct? Limitations now. Eighth house, other people's money, lending. I mean, it could get tight, but there's that sextile to Jupiter. If contracts, taxes, tariffs, if it's all renegotiated, then we can have expansion with Saturn. We can have expansion with Saturn because of Jupiter's presence in the sixth house. Now we flare out, and we go to the square with Mars, and we go to the square with Chiron. And this is where Saturn gets into trouble in the eighth house, because the 11th house is the mob. It is the mob. It is group mentality. There's Neptune, there's Venus, there's Chiron, there's Mars. Mars squaring Saturn, Chiron squaring Saturn. Pisces, you got a Chiron-Mars conjunction. It is the weekend of victims and martyrs. The weekend of victims and martyrs. Why? Because the next day, Mars was still in Pisces. Chiron was still conjunct Mars. We have Venus there at 17 in a wide orb. The next day, getting close to 18. It was at 1744. So we have the celebration of victims and martyrs in the Piscean domain of the 11th house. Crowds, groups, organizations. Pisces, it's not great. I'm sorry. You have Mars and Saturn working against one another. You have a conflict here because deep in the trenches, deep in the mausoleum of the eighth house, where there's mystery, where there's something alchemical taking place, you've got the hordes. In Mars and Pisces, I swear to God, it is the most kind of victim-y Mars in all the zodiac. And now there can be great imagination. Don't get me wrong. People that have Mars trine Neptune in their charts can have fantastic imagination. I've got a Mars-Neptune trine in my chart. I think I got a pretty good imagination. And most people with Mars-Neptune trines have good imaginations. And so I'm not knocking Mars and Pisces. Mars trine Neptune could be any sign. It's like having Mars and Pisces. Mars and Pisces is kind of Pisces likes to cry and likes to have emotion and likes to feel, and Mars amps it all up. So there's a lot of really active feeling with Mars and Pisces. Can't wait till it gets out of Pisces, to be honest with you. It's not quite opposite my sun yet, but it's getting close, and really I just want to get over this Mars-Pisces thing. I had Mars in my fourth house, and I spent 24 hours in a hospital. Yeah, I'm kind of done with Pisces for a while, and yet we're going to have the sun in Pisces in a couple. It's all good. It's like, do you want to hear a weird? I'll save this for another time. Should I? Hmm. I'll save it for another time. Let's stay with this chart. I want to stay on point. Somebody didn't like what my presentation last week. He says this is all BS. Unsubscribe. Well, hey man, I can't please everybody. You're either into it or you're not into it. There's another fakir. There's another fortune teller. There's another vizier. There's another shaman. There's another life coach. There's another astrologer. There's another psychic just down the corner. There's plenty of them out there. So hey, look, you don't like what I'm doing? It's okay. Can't please everybody. But but anyway, getting back to this Mars aspect, Chiron comes into Mars. And theoretically, right? Theoretically, there would be compassion there. I mean, it is really the compassionate heart. It is the heart gashed wide open. Chiron Mars conjunction, that there is suffering, real suffering on this planet. Not just a select suffering for a few. Right? Not just because, people have formulated agendas. And the formulated agendas come out of a whole program of conditioning. Really. How many people were at that march on Saturday in Washington, D.C. that really knew what happened in Libya? How many people knew that? How many people knew that we were sneaking all kinds of weapons into Libya just to completely decimate the place, get rid of Gaddafi, and use Libya as a staging area for regime change and the birth and the formation of ISIS? How many people really know that? How many people know that there have been more sorties and drone strikes and death under Obama's administration than any other president? How many people know that Obama's been a wartime president longer than any other president? He's the only president in U.S. history that has presided over a war through his entire presidency, and it's not because he had to. It's because he wanted to, because he was told to. I mean, there are degrees of ignorance that boggle my mind. And then when you attempt to tell people about it, especially if it's a woman who's kind of in this SJW camp, you're mansplaining to them. It's just ridiculous. You see, this is the victimization mode of Chiron Mars. And there it is squaring off against what? The patriarchy, right? I mean, Saturn is interesting because it's a feminine sign, but it represents the world. It represents the father in the chart. So we have Mars squaring Saturn, and there's a lot of anger towards Saturn in the 8th house in Sagittarius, the hidden father, the occulted father, maybe the father that wasn't there, maybe the father that was too busy working, maybe it was the father that had an affair, maybe it was the father that had a divorce. And we have the Mars Chiron squaring off against Saturn, and this is the template for the time. This is the template for the next 4 years. Histrionics and history all bleeding together into one smudgy watercolor of some representation of truth. And it's not. It's just not. If you work hard, you might be able to get to it with the Saturn square. But most people do not want to work hard for the truth because they want to hang on to their beautiful illusions, even though their beautiful illusions are completely and utterly false. What's really interesting is that when you think about anger, okay, think about anger for a minute as an emotion, because when we get into Mars, Chiron, we're stirring up anger in the 11th house, big picture stuff, right? And it's squaring off against Saturn. It's the institutional kind of railing. This is what's going on here. But think about anger for a moment as an emotion, okay? Do you know that when you're angry, your senses are heightened? That your fight and flight reflexes are sharp, attuned. You're almost like a hunter. You're predatory with that Mars, or no, with the Mars, with anger. I mean, can become quite addictive in many ways. There are a number of people who actually wind up being addicted to anger. And they're addicted to the endorphins. They're addicted to the adrenaline rush that anger brings them. But you know what also happens with anger? When you have anger, you separate yourself out. You cannot join in. You cannot be part of a greater whole when you're angry. You can't. You just can't, because everybody else around you is like, hey, come on, let's get in, let's do something. And if you're angry and pissed off, it is a mechanism of separation. It's a mechanism of separation, right? Now, again, baptized Christian, we're in a Piscean dialogue here. I've been to church in 40 years, okay? But what was Satan? What was Satan? Satan was angry, right? He was angry at God. And so what do we have? We have separation. We have separation. We have the fall in many ways, right? This is what anger does. It keeps us separate. And so there are a lot of forces in the world that promote anger because it promotes separation. And when we promote separation, what do we have? We have conflict and we have duality. We have the forces of anger and we have the forces who are being angered against, with the whole goal that there would be anger bouncing off these two separate forces. But what would happen if they let go of the anger? What would take place? Well, for a lot of people, they'd have to kind of rewire their entire system, because they wouldn't be amped up on adrenaline and endorphins and the select neuropeptides and neuroreceptors that anger would bring them. In essence, they'd have to die. Think about that. Think about that. And I think in a lot of ways, it's very close to the conversion experience. Because you have any anger, resentment, all that stuff, you just got to give it away. And then you die. You die to this world, you die to the body, and you die into a new form. The energy body of the Christ. This is what happens. But anger, it has to be you have to let go of it. And so what do we see now? We're seeing an angry world. We're seeing a very angry world. And squaring off against Saturn. And if this is the template, then we're going to be dealing with this for the next 4 years. It will not abate. Now, there's potential in that 11th house. Because if you look at Venus and you look at Neptune, Neptune's kind of hanging back there, creeping along at 10 degrees, Venus at 17 degrees. There's a 7-degree orb. It's an interesting number, isn't it? 7 is the number of heaven. Starts up here, and then the energy descends downward into this plane of existence. This plane of consciousness. And what is Venus? So Venus and Neptune are kind of hanging back with their own experience. Now Venus is also in conjunction with Chiron. Can there be healing between Venus women and Mars men as a part of this? I don't know. This is really interesting. I've had a few people, a few women contact me about this Million Women March, and a lot of them are just not down with it. They don't want to see themselves or have these women as representing their identity or their consciousness. It's kind of like if I'm a man and I'm seeing these guys march for me, and they've got some some agenda or some energy that I don't relate to. I would take offense to that. It's like, you don't represent me. You don't represent me. And I think that there are a number of women who believe that these women don't represent them. And I'm not just talking conservative women. I'm talking women that think and feel and have a consciousness that doesn't bifurcate. And what we're seeing now is a definite bifurcation. But here we go. We've got Venus-Neptune, which can be actually quite nice. You get into a Venus-Neptune conjunction inside of a composite chart. Wow, you are in a really intoxicating place. Now, is it real? Is the relationship real, or is it just some form of kumbaya? Some some astrological bubbles and froth, and what's real about it? You don't know. You have to go through it. But certainly, Venus Neptune can be beautiful, can be wonderful, can be powerful, can be profound. Now, Venus here is in exact sextile with Pluto in the ninth house. So we have the potential for transformation. We have the potential for transforming the group experience. We have the potential of transforming the psyche. We can't transform the psyche of women. Women are going to be women. But maybe, just maybe, there can be an experience of balanced interchange from a feminine perspective that may view the Capricornian energy a bit differently. I mean, I think there's potential here, but it has to be acted upon. It has to be acted upon. And it doesn't act, Pluto will act upon, I mean, look, when we talk about inferior and superior planets, it is Pluto that is acting upon Venus. It's not vice versa. It's Pluto acting upon Venus. So there's intensity and there's power coming out of the ninth house. Pluto is at the highest point of the chart here. Now it's in a T-square with Uranus, and it's in a T-square with Jupiter. That's actually pretty big, but it's at the highest point of the chart. So at the highest point of the chart, Pluto in the ninth house can be incredibly visionary. It's seeing the world in a different kind of way and being able to influence and exhibit the power, transformation, and change from the top down. And that can be actually encouraging. But there is going to be a level of explosive subversion for the next 4 years because we can see Uranus in the 12th house. How do we get around that? I was talking, well, I wasn't even talking with her, but I saw a post from Teresa over on Facebook, and she thinks that Trump will be the president that will get us into free energy. She says it's in his chart. Now, he's got the Sun-Uranus conjunction, Uranus trine Jupiter. I wouldn't doubt that Trump could usher in some very interesting and unique innovations in energy. I don't think that's out of the question. Free energy in 4 years, I don't think so. If he's there for 8 years, he might. Who knows? 8 years from now. I mean, we live a week, and it feels like 6 months in a week, or 2 months in a week. I mean, time is speeding up at such a phenomenal rate, or at least it feels that way. So much is going on right now in a very non-perceptible sense. We're going to talk about some of that a little bit. I mean, when I say barely perceptible sense. But I think some things can happen here, and there's going to be change in a very powerful way with Pluto in the ninth house, at that level of the chart, the apex of the chart. So we have the Mars-Chiron conjunction squaring off against Saturn. We talked about that. We have the Saturn-Jupiter sextile, which is absolutely powerful and terrific. And then there's that moon in Scorpio. That's such an intense moon, that moon in Scorpio. It's fixed. It is a, what is that? That's a third quarter moon. What is that? Waxing, I think it's going to be waxing gibbous. It's a waxing gibbous moon. And it's in trine with Venus and sextile Mercury. Of all the planets, the moon probably has the most, I would say, positive energy, although Scorpio moon is it's intense, it's kind of grudge-like. So here we have the Scorpio moon conjunct the descendant, and this is this is interesting. If man or masculine energy, the male in the chart, the father in the chart, is Saturn, and it's hidden, tucked away in the 8th house. And the moon is the mother, and there's the moon, it's in the 7th house. Women are going to have a relationship with Donald Trump and the administration for the entire time he's in there. It's square to the sun. We have people with Moon and Capricorn in general that have a grudge, and they're not going to let it go. They're not going to let it go. Not with this square to the sun. Ain't happening. Ain't happening, boss. Um, and that sun is uniquely kind of unaspected, with the exception of the conjunction of the midheaven. We talked about the square to the moon, and square to Jupiter, which is the potential for abundance in money. And then there's the semi-sextile to Venus. But other than that, the sun is relatively alone. So we're going to have a very interesting, very interesting 4 years. Mercury's in Capricorn, so there's some at a high place in the chart, second only to Pluto, and it's in a fairly visionary place because Mercury in Capricorn needs goals and sees deeply into the future and says these are the steps we need to take. And there's a quintile with Venus. So wonderful aspect. That's at let's see, it's 144 for a biquintile, so it's a 70. Is it 72? 140. It's a 72-degree angle. Yeah, 72-degree angle. And the quintiles, I haven't really talked a lot about quintiles. We have a quintile, and then we have a biquintile with Venus and Jupiter in the chart. And quintiles and biquintiles are these aspects, they're minor aspects that represent some kind of mastery, some kind of genius, some kind of magic in the chart. So here we have a Mercury-Venus quintile. That's fascinating, maybe we just need to talk to each other more. The Mercury-Venus quintile has to do, I think, with sort of a higher understanding, since Mercury's coming out of the ninth house, more philosophical, discourse around what's possible. Because Venus in the 11th house is great. I mean, it's like it's very democratic. Venus in the 11th house. I mean, what would happen if we all just put down our grudges for a moment and asked ourselves what's possible? Because with the sun at 0 degrees Aquarius, it almost demands that we have that inquiry. What's possible? What can we do? Now, not everybody's going to be satisfied. Some people have very dyed-in-the-wool kind of perceptions and objectives. And no matter what you say to them, they're not going to move. But this quintile is indicating that we need to have a dialogue around what's possible. What can we do? I mean, what could we really do? Everything has been utterly reactive for the last 16 years. Utterly reactive. And it all starts with, 9/11/2001, which initiates the greatest reactive moment in modern history, the preemptive strike. The clear doctrine, the clear break doctrine, totally reactive. And we've been reactive ever since. And here comes Obama, and it's all reactionary. Reactionary race relations, reactionary identity politics. We had a reactionary campaign run by Hillary Clinton. React. And we're just doing the same thing over and over again in many instances. But what would happen if we sat down and said, well, what's the possibility? I mean, we didn't even have that when Obama was in office. Did we ever sit down and say, hey, what is the possibility here? I mean, let's just say, for instance, you are who you say you are. What's possible? Well, he laid it out in his run-up to being elected, and everything was possible. There wasn't anything. Oh, we're gonna get out of Iraq. We're gonna close down Guantanamo. We're gonna, blah 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 blah. You're gonna be able to keep your original plan. I mean, but none of that ever happened. I think Trump needs to have, he really needs to have a national town hall meeting. I mean, if he's serious about giving the people their government back, he needs to listen hard to what people have to say. Doesn't mean he's going to do it. It doesn't mean he's going to uh, change his morality. I mean, the guy's 70 years old. You know, hey, look, he's got no problems with gay, bisexual, transgender people. I mean, Caitlyn Jenner was at the inauguration ball. I mean, think about that. Think about that. Caitlyn Jenner at the inauguration ball having a gay old time. Tell me where it says in his playbook that he is anti-LGBT trans people. The poster child, the poster woman, she's not a child, the poster person of LGBT trans world is at his inauguration ball. You know, but I think that he needs to have that. I think it's important. But what's possible? What is possible? Have people lost touch with possibility? You see, this is the Venus quintile to Mercury. We need to have a dialogue. 11th house about where this is all headed. And not because we think it's headed, you know, into some bizarre kind of reductive, reactive world from 300 years ago. You know, somebody sent me an email with this piece on, you know, this is not the beginning of a new era, it's the end of America. It's another one of these, you know, feel-good, polymorphic, left-leaning kind of utopianists. And it's like, no, don't even send this to me. Don't even send this to me. Because where were we going? I mean, people cannot face the facts. Look, I'm on my soapbox a little bit here. People can't face the facts. We were living in a country that's becoming more racially divided every single week that Obama was in office. We had a country where there were more false flags under Obama's regime than any other, and there were false flags going on for a long time. Gulf of Tonkin, we have, what else, false flaggy? There's plenty of them. Pearl Harbor was kind of a false flag. It wasn't a psyop, but it was a false flag. So we've had these things going on for quite a while. But only in the last 8 years where they were just stacking like poker chips. So, you know, what was I mean, hope and change. But, you know, what were we really talking about? You know, what were we really dialoguing about what we're capable of? It wasn't there. It was never there. It was people kind of, you know, sniffing the glue, you know, off of Obama's coattails. I mean, it's just really where it was at. Anyway, this Mercury-Venus quintile says we could have a dialogue. We could. You know, what if we sat down and said, hey, look, we want jobs. Look, here's the deal. This is Uranus in the 12th house, by the way, lurking in this chart. We are at a place where the worker is about to become completely wiped off the face of the earth. That is really the big issue here. And it's been a big issue for a while. It's not about 15. I saw these people. You know, when I was at a march, I was in Philadelphia, not this last Friday, February 4 last, not this last Martin Luther King Day, but the one before. And I was in Philadelphia, and I was watching these people march, and they're, you know, typical kind of unionist, communist brigade, great signs and everything, right? And they're like, you know, we want $15 an hour, $20 an hour. I was like, you know what? You go ahead and demand that, but I guarantee you what you really should be talking about is, AI and robotics, because your job is going to go away. It is going to, if you demand that you get $15 an hour at McDonald's, there is a robot ready to replace you next week. And that is just the hard, cold facts of life. So we're at a point where that is the big elephant in the room. It is the worker, it is the human. And so what Trump is trying to do is trying to get as many people back to work and have jobs and beyond that 20th century track, right? Be able to pay for your existence, be productive, add to the whole, give things to your kids, help them get a leg up so they could have a better life than you had, because you had a better life than your parents had, and they had a better life than their parents had. And so we're stepping one level at a time all the way up the pyramid until finally we get to a generation where everybody in that generation is just kicking ass. And there's some level of kind of group enlightenment that takes place along the way. I mean, that's what he wants to do. But the bottom line is we've got all these companies that are bursting at the seams, ready to get AI, ready to get robotics out into the marketplace. It's right there. It's at the inauguration chart. That's Uranus and Aries hidden in the 12th house, squaring off against Pluto, opposing Jupiter and Libra. Remember now, if the 6th house is the everyday worker, right? If it's the person that makes your latte or cuts your lawn, that's the 6th house. And there's Jupiter over there wanting to expand. Look, it's on the other side. It's Uranus. It's hidden, tucked away, opposing this Jupiter operation down in the 6th house. You know what I love, though, about this, also about this Jupiter piece? Because there's an inconjunct with Mars and Jupiter. And we're going to have to go through a transformation of our relationship of the opposite sex. I mean, this is paramount, because if we can see the challenge with the world right now is we're so divided. We are so utterly divided, and the only way we can get out of the division is by having some kind of unifying principle. Now, of course, the outside threat is always great for uniting people. Correct? We had the Nazis in World War II. We had this group over here, Russians, United States. Here we go, triangulating against the Nazis. So everybody pulled together. There were allies that were joining sides that hadn't joined sides before. There you go, triangulation. That's one way of doing it. Whether it's aliens or the Nazis, that's one. But another way is if we just flip some switches, and the next thing you know, we have an organizing principle which is greater than this triangulation where people are actually pitted against one another, or at least not pitted, but joined forces against the outside threat. It's got to be men and women. It has to be, because men and women exist throughout, in every race and every culture. Now, if we can build a bridge between men and women, then we can begin to have some form of unification or organizing principle. In order to do that, this is where I think that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction can really come in and make a statement. It's like we have to, rewire our roles as men and women. We have to. Women have gotten hard and men have gotten soft. That's the bottom line. And it's out of balance. And so men, without being, complete assholes and get into some really cold maneuvers, because this is what sort of the new men's movement has maybe unintentionally morphed into. So I'm gonna get mine. We've got to change our roles. We've got to come back to things that we've left behind, because here's what's happening. It may not be happening for the rest of the world. No, I take that back. It is happening for the rest of the world. It's not happening for the internationalists and the globalists. The programs that started in the 1960s, and we're talking Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. Remember that now, Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. Neptune in Pisces has been opposing that Uranus-Pluto conjunction. So everything that was started in the 60s, whether it was one of the isms, the Vietnam War, drugs, MK Ultra, mind control, opposing Neptune is coming along and dissolving those structures from that time. It dissolves the structures from the people born during that time. We've seen this. But it's dissolving the social structures that were created during that time. It was the locus of mind control. It was the control center for moving people out of a state of collective trauma and into a state of collective malleability. This is what happened. So that started during the 1960s, and we had massive changes, and eventually it kind of ramped up. We got into the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but it all starts in the 60s. It's the genesis of it all. And the social programming, the programming of the social mind, and the change in education, you saw it happen across the country in terms of professors embracing Foucault and the politics, the sexual politics of Foucault. Masters and Johnson were promoted. So there was this kind of ideological and psychological push in the 60s. And it led to socialization inside of the school system. The schools got changed. And, we went from old math to new math to see it out, sound it out, all that stuff. And now we're in Common Core, which is the kind of the apotheosis of all of that. So what's happening is that through that time, there has been more value-based learning, where everybody gets a trophy. It was definitely a slow lurch towards the socialist mind. Now, if you look at where Neptune has been since 2011, 3/11/2011, as it moves into Pisces, it began to oppose that Uranus-Pluto conjunction that took place during the 1960s. Now, it's not quite there yet, but when it gets to, right around 15, 16 degrees, it's getting close. Then we can see the unraveling because the outer planets determine the tone and the tenor of the time. They just do. So during the 60s, you had that wild Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And in Virgo, it was kind of casting off. It was kind of casting off the conservative energy of Virgo, because the back end was Pisces. And I believe there was going through Saturn in Pisces during that time, which is around 1965, 66, Saturn in Pisces. And that's right around the time all this stuff starts kicking in a big way. Anyway, what's happening now is that's unraveling. And we're waking up. We're waking up, some of us we're waking up looking around and saying, what the hell's going on here? What's happened to these people? How did they get this way? How did they get so angry? How did they get to this point where if you talk about something that is something they don't feel great about or they want to reject, and all of a sudden they go into an apoplectic fits? I mean, I've talked about it before, it's almost a form of possession. But really what it is that there is this ideal that was consumed, like it was like a sacrament. It was like the catechism of the ideal. And what happened is that we wound up creating, not in all people, don't get me wrong, we wound up creating ultimately a massive number of Emma Goldmans who are just willing to burn everything down. It's really fascinating. But in order for us to get this thing back on track, there are a couple things that need to take place. We're going to have to rebalance our relationship with the sexes. We have to rebalance our relationship with ourselves, men and women. And we should look at our assumptions about who we are and what we've either eschewed or taken for granted, and get back on track and see if we can cut each other a little bit more slack and become a little more loving, and maybe take on some of the more traditional roles. And it's like, is that a bad thing to do? Is that a dirty thing to do? No, because what happened with men is men got locked into a really rigid form of, how they were supposed to live their lives. And very orderly, very Apollonian. And then what happened is that men drank from the Dionysian chalice. And who was the great agent of Dionysus? Who was the manifestation of Dionysus? It was Jim Morrison. And this became the model for man. The wild, unhinged, psychotic, borderline psychotic, instinctual male. Well, Jim Morrison turns into Charles Manson. And I know that there are, Miles Mathis says Manson didn't do anything. Maybe he didn't. But from the persona of what Charles Manson is and did, he becomes the dark shadow of Jim Morrison. This is Dionysius without any kind of regard, theoretically, for human life. As it relates simply to what we consumed, or what they wanted us to consume. Clearly Morrison was there, clearly he existed, and clearly he was this image of the wild and untamed Dionysian male. And men, on some level, needed to do that and pull their shirts off and get in touch with their wildness. But the problem is that Morrison took it to nihilistic extremes. It's like Morrison was like this Pied Piper. And he just led, I'm not saying he did this to everybody, but this is what, he's leading people off the edge with no return back. This is what happened. And for women have their own kind of, I suppose, image around this. I mean, if you go back to Gloria Steinem and the feminists, and everything that's kind of related to that, and I guess Joni Mitchell, in a way, exploring herself and her sexually liberated identity through all these different relationships and her music. I mean, I guess there's some kind of symbolism for that. But ultimately, women got engaged in the whole kind of feminist wave. And men moved from Apollo to Dionysus. And women kind of moved more into an Apollonian realm. And this was just in the 60s and the 70s. I'll never forget when I was working at this apartment complex. There was this guy that lived there. He was a total music geek. And he had memorabilia and signed records. I mean, this guy he was just a total music geek. Anyway, he said to me, I was like 19 years old, he said, I went through women's liberation and I became a sensitive guy because I really thought that this is what I needed to do, and I'd meet women and I'd be able to relate to them, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. So what he told me is, this is back in 1979. He said, he lost himself. And ultimately, that's really not what women wanted. So we've gone through all these changes together. We've gone through them all. Did women You need to be staying at home all the time and, just consigned to this kind of laborious duty in the household while the man went out and worked and had 3 martini lunches. Hell no. I mean, that's, ultimately, that's boring, I think, on some level. But here's the deal: it plays an important role, and we have these energies that are associated with our chromosomes. It's just it's the way it is, and I think we've been fighting against it now for quite a long time. And I think women had to go through this period and phase because they needed to. They needed to break out of that mold. Well, men needed to tear their shirts off, I suppose, and get in touch with their lustful, wild Dionysian side. But there is a decay to both of those trajectories, a total decay. And we've all come through it. And now I think we have to reintegrate sort of the changes and what works and what doesn't work. Because, losing oneself to the Dionysian urge is obliteration. You might learn something or you may die. Convincing yourself that you're as equal and as strong and as powerful as a man and proving it at every single turn to the point where you're sitting at home and you're lonely and you've got a bucket of Haagen-Dazs and a 3-speed vibrator. I mean, where does that lead? That's a cul-de-sac too. So we've got to come back from this. We've got to come back from these places in our lives. And this is what Jupiter and Libra theoretically can do. It's not going to be around for much longer. I mean, it's going to be in Scorpio, and we're in the deep level of sexuality in Scorpio. We're into psyche with Jupiter and Scorpio. We're expanding into areas that are in the transpersonal. So I think that we at the very least, have to have the dialogue with ourselves. Where are you? Where are you on that spectrum? It's a worthwhile dialogue. To that extent, there's a Moon-Mars trine. Actually, it's Moon, but not quite. It is we got the Moon-Mercury sextile, the Moon-Venus trine. That's lovely. That's absolutely lovely. That's a chord. That's deep emotional chord. From the 7th house, edge of the 6th, it's ingressing 5 degrees into the 7th with Venus in the 11th. There's the potential for harmony there. Anyway, it's food for thought as we break down the inauguration chart in the next 4 years ahead of Donald J. Trump. I wanted to look at this week's stars, if we don't mind, if we can get into this. And, not going to apologize for my instincts around the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine, because I think it's important and not talked about nearly enough. Let's see what we have here. Hey, look, Moon's in Sagittarius. Look what I'm doing. Talking shit tonight. Moon in Sagittarius, 9 degrees. Topo Chico's the best. Mercury, Capricorn, 9 degrees. It's just getting ready to, it's over there in the second decan. Well, not quite. Tomorrow, later in the day, goes into second decan, which puts it into the Capricornian decan. Starting the week off with money concerns, ambition, the desire for more status, more gravitas. This is a good week to plan your budget for the year. I mean, do people really plan their budgets for the year? I mean, I'm getting more into this whole planning and organization thing. I'm doing stuff this year. The Mercury is, it's not warm and fuzzy in Capricorn. It takes a good, hard, cold look at what's going on. It's a big, it's a pretty visionary energy that slices away the extremists to get to a point where there is a path forward into the future, and it doesn't matter what it is. So this week we're dealing this week and next week we're dealing with money issues. We're dealing with grounding, real grounding in our personal life, and maybe even money issues at a larger level with the planet, or not with the planet, but the country at large. I believe Mercury's conjunct right now Russia's sun. Russia being early Capricorn, so expect more communication to come out from Russia this week, which is usually behind the scenes, but they may actually make some kind of pronouncement that will get headlines. We've got Venus in Pisces still, and that has moved into the third decan, so we put it in the Scorpio decan, and so is Mars. So they're in this. This is about as close as they get. 2026, Mars at 26, getting ready to go into Aries, and that's going to be a kind of a interesting energy when Mars goes into Aries. We're going to have that Mars-Pluto square, Mars on Uranus. That's intense. We talked about that before. Talk more about that as we get closer to that Mars-Pluto conjunction. That's going to be a big one. I mean, I think if there's a time for intensity, violence, war, it's that Mars-Pluto conjunction squaring Uranus. That's. You want to know when that is? When is that, Robert? When is that, Robert? Robert, tell us. I'll tell you when it is. Give me a second. Okay, we have. Let's see. Here we go. We have ephemeris, ephemerate. We have the Mars Pluto conjunction. It's right at the end of February. Right at the end of February. So we have 22, and actually it's a little bit before that. So we're talking right around the 22nd of February. And the moon is in Capricorn. That's a tricky time. So we have 18, and we have, let's square Pluto, but let's go to the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It's a little bit later. Let's see, so we have 23, 26. So March 5th is when Mars and Uranus are conjunct. Pluto squaring at 18. Jupiter, part of that T-square, 22. It's a lot of stress during that time. A lot of stress, a lot of intensity. And then we have the Piscean sun, which is, it's not always the most direct source. Let's put it that way. If we go to the 7th, March 7th, to March 8th, we have Moon in Cancer, Mars in Aries. It's in a wide orb, 10 degrees with Pluto. It's moved past Uranus. So that's okay. We have Moon in Aries with, that's on the 2nd. That's on the 2nd. Moon in Aries, conjunct Mars in Aries, conjunct Uranus in Aries, square Pluto opposite Jupiter. Boy, short tempers. Really short tempers. With a short fuse. And Jupiter's retrograde. Wow. I don't know. I'm trying to stay away from the doom and gloom stuff, but that's just such heavy, intense military energy. And under the Piscean sky, it's not always clear. Just not clear. There's going to be a conjunction with the Sun and Neptune during that time. How clear are we going to be with really what's going on? That's a tricky time. And then Venus goes retrograde on the 4th of March. It's the Venus retrograde period for this year. And it goes retrograde all the way back to 26 Pisces. And that hits on the 15th of April. That's tax day. Now we could look at 26 Pisces. When we look at the shadow, we can actually look at the shadow of Venus retrograde. Goes back a ways, doesn't it? Goes all the way back to, let's see, January 30th. So in 7 days, we enter into the shadow of Venus retrograde. How about that? A lot of relationship issues are going to come up for people. In Aries, it has to do with power. And who has it, who doesn't. Maybe retrograde, it's a redistribution of power. It's interesting. Let's get into some more of the current stars of the day. We have, let's see, Jupiter 22, we've been talking about that. In Libra, Saturn at 23, we're talking about that. Squaring off against Mars. Mars has moved ahead now, squaring off against Venus. So we get to the exact square with Venus in 5 days, roughly. So what is that? Today's the 28th. 23rd should be the 28th. And we have good old Venus. 28th Venus is at 24. Saturn's at 24. So I was right. That's when we get into the exact square. The 28th, that's a weekend. I think a lot of people during that weekend of the 28th are going to look very hard at their commitments and in a very clear and sober way, looking at what's real and what's not real inside the relationship or any relationship. Your relationship to Saturn, work, your relationship to how truthful you are about your work and your purpose. That's Saturn and Sagittarius. What's going on inside your relationship or relationships. If you don't have one, that's a Venus-Saturn square that can be real sobering. And you may want to make changes in order because it's okay to be with another person. It's okay to bond with another person. It's okay, to have connection. We've been taught for such a long period of time that we're going to be strong and independent, and not always the case. Let's see what we have here. We have Neptune, Pisces 10, yes. And we're going to start the week off with a Moon-Neptune square. Be careful what you share with the Moon-Neptune square. Venus and Sagittarius, a Moon in Sagittarius. I mean, you could really, really convince of your truth. You could be really convinced of your emotional truth, and you can share it, and then boom, next thing you know, it's like, wow, that really wasn't the totality of the truth. But it's okay. You can go there. You can feel it. True note, of course, is that we have Pluto, Capricorn, 17 degrees. And we have true node at 3, Chiron 21. We've done a lot of work on these planets already. Let's check out some birthdays today, shall we? And then we're going to get into this lunar eclipse coming up. I'll check in with people in the chat room. Any interesting birthdays? Let's see. Let's see a whole lot of interesting birthdays. So we're at early Aquarius. John Hancock. Mariska Hargitay. That's Jane Mansfield's kid. Mariska Hargitay. Rutger Hauer. Aquarian. Let's see, anybody really interesting. Mildly interesting. Um, yeah, I'm not seeing anybody. Chesley Sullenberger, isn't that the Captain Sully? The plane? Yes. I did a chart on him a long time ago. And that moment is an interesting chart. Let's check it out. He might be the most interesting person. Again, this is tomorrow, technically. Neptune, this is really interesting. Check this out. So, what is he known for? He's known for navigating a plane, a jet, into the Hudson Harbor. Well, there's Neptune right on his midheaven, which is water. And retrograde could theoretically mean that he had to do something that he didn't want to do. So Neptune plays a huge role in his chart. That's really interesting. Really, really interesting. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Saturn might have been in Libra at that time. I'd have to go back and check. Let's just see here. Let me get the story. What date was this? I'm sorry, my nose is probably creating a distraction. Let me just go back into this chart. What do we have here? Oh yeah, Chesley Sullenberger. So that took place on January 15th, 2009. 2009. So let's go into the ephemeris. Let's go to 2009. January 15th. Let's just see where Saturn was. It might have been the last degrees of Virgo. Let's just find out. 2009. Yeah, so it was at okay, 21 Virgo on that day, and Mars was in Pisces. Sorry, Venus was in Pisces. Mars Aquarius. Mars Capricorn, Jupiter Aquarius. Moon in Virgo, Sun in Capricorn. But he has Neptune up on that midheaven. So what is he known for? He's known for piloting a plane into the Hudson Harbor, which is absolutely fascinating. Let me just go back to the chart one more time. Jupiter in Pisces and true node in Pisces, dealing with water. Third house. There we go. And also, he's got all these strange and interesting water placements. Uranus and Cancer, 7th house. Trine Mars. Where's his Mars? Pisces, 0 degrees. So he has all these Piscean elements. Neptune on the midheaven, Mars in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, true node in Pisces, Uranus in Cancer, trine Mars, trine Jupiter. Clearly a lot of Pisces. A lot of water. And the guy became a hero for landing his plane in water. He has Moon, which is, again, considered a water planet in the 8th house in Leo, and sextiling Saturn, and what do we have here? Opposition to Sun. Interesting. But to me, Neptune is really what grabs me in this chart at the midheaven, along with all that the Piscean stuff down in the 2nd and the 3rd house. Anyway, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Sully, an American hero. Let me just check in with the chat room, see if there's anybody in there, what's happening, see if there's any people that have questions. Let me see what we got here. There's the live stream. Do we have the live stream going on? Should have the live stream, right? Let's see where we. Let me just where are we? Here we go. Because I set the live stream, and see what we got here coming in. And here we go. Feminists can be healed, transformed. What do we have here? Trump has surrounded himself with some excellent women. I think Trump's relationship with women is very interesting. He's got a lot of women that he's employed. Hi there. Hey, Robert, finally caught you live. Hi there. We have any more questions? Let's see what else is going on here. Any more? It's mostly Lois Lane. How many people are on? We have 0 watching right now. Oh man, it's a bummer. What happened? Did the stream happen? Let's see. Can you hear me? Oh, Wildflower. Hi, Wildflower. Here I am. Oh yeah, there's 26 people watching me. Is it the same 26 people that watch me every week? Man, I gotta somehow bump this up a little bit. I wanted to talk about this upcoming eclipse, and I think you guys probably want to hear about that. So let me get into the eclipse. The eclipse for this year happens on the 10th, 11th of February. So we have 18 days till the first eclipse of 2017. It is a penumbral eclipse, which means that the eclipse happens at the Earth's penumbra. So the Earth has the plane of the moon, the ascending, the descending plane. There's a path, and one part of that plane is called the umbra, and then the other part is called the penumbra. Okay. So people are going to see the eclipse in Europe, a lot of Asia, Africa, North America, South America, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean. They'll all be visible. This is the Wikipedia definition of the penumbral eclipse. A total penumbral eclipse is a lunar eclipse that occurs when the moon becomes completely immersed in the penumbral cone of the Earth without touching the umbra. Umbra being the top part. It is the narrow path for the moon to pass within the penumbra and outside the umbra. It can happen on the Earth's northern or southern penumbral edges. In addition, the size of the penumbra is sometimes too small where the moon enters it to contain the moon. The width of the Earth's penumbra is determined by the sun's angular diameter at the time of the eclipse. When the moon's angular diameter is larger than the sun over part of its elliptical orbit, depending on whether the eclipse occurs at its nearest perigee or its farthest point apogee in its orbit around the Earth. The majority of the time, the size of the moon and the size of the Earth's penumbra where the moon crosses it mean that most eclipses will not be in total penumbral. And I believe this is not a total penumbral eclipse. No, it is not. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, from an astrological standpoint, let's go into those days, which is the 10th and the 11th of February. And where are we? 2017. There we go. So we have the 10th and 11th. I want to do a eclipse chart here. So the moon is going to be obviously full. That's going to be in Leo. And it is going to be close to Donald Trump's ascendant. Pretty close. Close to his Mars. Wow. Interesting. I don't think it's an assassination day. No, I don't. It's going to be close to his Mars, though. And what else is happening? It's a Saturday, so we're 2/11, and we have Mercury in Aquarius. And that's at 5 degrees, Sun in Aquarius, 22. Of course, there's the moon in Leo, 22. We have Venus in Aries at, let's see, 5. and it has not gone retrograde yet. Venus does not go retrograde until March. We'll have Mars in Aries. It's going to be at 10, and it begins its movement towards the square to Pluto. It will be in, let's see, yeah, it's going to be in a semi-sextile with Neptune during that time, 30-degree orb. I think that this first eclipse of 2017 in Leo, here's what I think. I think it's going to have an ability to illuminate petty tyranny. Now, Trump may fall into that category. He may have an illumination close to his Mars. It's coming out of the 12th house. It's very close to. Here's what I think. I think from a Trump perspective, this is just from Trump, I think he's going to discover something. I think Trump is going to uncover a plot right around this time. And I think it will make. I'm not sure if it'll make news because it'll be happening in his 12th house. I think he's going to uncover some kind of plot during that time. I don't think that this eclipse bodes well for Obama. So I think something's going to come out right around this eclipse. On the back side of this eclipse, maybe we come to, that's a news day, that Friday. They dump a lot of news on that day. Something's going to come out around Obama, I think, right around this time. And it will not be flattering. And then we have a Mars, let's see, Moon in Scorpio. That's on the 17th. Then we have, let's see, what's the next? I think something's going to pop here because there's this whole kind of illumination of Leo energy, which is connected to kings and royalty and queens and even tyranny, and how they rule, how they relate to the rest of us. And I think this is so Obama is I think he's around 15, 16 degrees Leo. So I think this moon's going to be right around his sun. It's going to be interesting. Anyway, I mean, I think that the time in general is an illumination of how people, particularly people in positions of power, can use and abuse their authority and their tyranny. Because you're dealing with Aquarius, remember? You're dealing with Aquarian energies, which tend to offset the potential for tyranny at a global level. But that's going to be the first eclipse. It's going to affect Aquarians. It's going to affect Leos. And you want to see where it's going to be in your chart. So for me, that eclipse is going to be on my Uranus in the 9th house. For a lot of people with Uranus and Leo, that moon's going to be on your Uranus. Pluto and Leo, baby boomers, that moon is going to be on your Pluto. For all you millennials out there, that moon's going to square your Pluto. And it could be kind of a call to arms in some ways. You never know. So it's going to affect a number of different generations here with the penumbral eclipse. But that's not the biggie. The biggie is on August 21st. That's a big one. Now one crosses the United States, and at August 21st, that eclipse is right on Trump's ascendant. That's a big one, and conjunct his Mars. That could be a very heavy time for Donald John Trump. And that to me, that is assassination energy. And that's on 21st of August. It's a big one, and it affects the entire country. To me, that's a Kennedy-esque kind of moment. Anyway, we're not going to project that into the future. I'm just giving you my take on it. Um, so yeah, find out where Leo is in your chart. Find out what house it's in. That's where this lunar eclipse will be. I tend to believe, in my experiences, lunar eclipses are way more subtle than solar eclipses. Way more. Solar eclipses are very powerful. I've experienced the power of the solar eclipse. Almost died on it last year. Okay, so you've got your decoding for the week ahead, I believe. We've broken down the inauguration chart as it relates to where we're headed. We've gotten into some maybe controversial social theory and social territory. We've looked at a chart. We've looked at the eclipse. I think we've gotten our admissions worth tonight, don't you? You can always find me over at robertphoenix.com, and I'm getting things together. You're going to see a lot more writing coming from me. Everything is. I've been working assiduously over the last week or so to change some things just in my work structure, studio, whole 9 yards. So you're the rooster. We got to work hard, and you're the rooster. God bless the cedar fever. All right, so you can find me at robertphoenix.com. I do consultations, I do readings. I'm about to launch a new reading. I'm doing the everything reading, which has been great. I'm adding 2 new features to the everything reading. I thought about this, and it's like, I've got to do this. Because you're not going to get everything unless you get these 2 other features. And the 2 other features are, guess what I'm going to do Sabian symbols for every one of your personal planets. How about that? And I'm going to throw in the basic structure of your human design. Okay, that's going to be part of the everything. It is not going to be the same manufacturer's retail price because I'm going to be working harder and longer. It's going to be a little bit more money, but it will be everything. Everything you want will be in this reading. So that's coming to a screen near you. I hope everybody's having a good 2017 so far. It's gotten off to a really bizarre start. The energies are volatile, explosive. We've never been here before. Never. I don't care how bad you think Nixon was or Reagan was, or the antipathy towards both. This is nothing. They are nothing compared to what's happening right now. These are interesting times. And these are catalytic times. They're really catalytic times. You know, I think that we've gone through this period phase cycle where it was really uncool to like America. It was really uncool to like America. If you liked America, you were square, you were conservative. It was like, oh, after a bad taste, and look at all the shit we've done. But we're going to have to fall back in love with ourselves. We have to fall back in love with this country. It's just the way it is. Now, of course, we're citizens of the universe. Of course we are. But we're here, at least I am. Some of you may be in another country. And you have to fall back in love with your country. Why not? We're getting a big advertising blitz with England right now. You know, it's all over the Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, Food Channel, even the NFL Network. They're showing all these really great commercials for England. You know, it's like Manchester. That's the real England. London's the real England. You know, so it's like, you know, there's like a great feeling of pride in that commercial. People loving their country. People loving their city inside their country. I mean, why not? What became so arch and hip and cynical? How did this all happen? I mean, I know how it happened, but how did it all happen? Just like how we're having to come back and circle around to our relationships with the idea of masculinity and the idea of femininity and how we conjoin with that, I think we've got to reassess our relationship with where we're living and figure out how we're going to bring out the best of those things. Because we become jaded and cynical and disaffected. And jaded and cynical and disaffected people, while they are capable of living on the fringe and living on the edge and having the insight of the outsider, they are not capable of sustaining a culture. And that's just the way it is. So we have to reintegrate and re-emerge into the culture in a way where we've been out in the cold, we've been out in the fringe, and we can begin to warm up once again to some of the ideals that aren't probably all that bad. Because it was very hard being an American when Bush was around. Extremely hard. I hated our role overseas. I hated our role in the Middle East. I remember traveling to Europe during that time, and people were not digging America and what we were doing. Just not. Ugh. You know, I mean, unless you were just this dyed-in-the-wool religio conservative that just bought everything Bush was selling and the terror threat and all that bullshit, unless you had that, then it was not an easy time to be a thinking and feeling person in America. And it certainly didn't get much easier with Obama, especially if you were, riding with the blinders off. All right, so that's it. I'm going to wrap it up here. Hey, have a wonderful week. Enjoy yourselves. Take time out to recognize that even though this place can be really hellish, life is a gift. Life is a gift. It really is a gift. It is not a sentence. Just remember that and try to live with that a little bit more each day. See what we can cook up here on this planet. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. I'm me, you're you. Have a wonderful week. I'll be back tomorrow with a flame. I'll be flaming on. This is Robert Phoenix signing off.